Okay, so as I mentioned, when you get to the exercise set page, it's going to look kind of like that. I'm just going to turn this around for a moment. And it has instructions, okay? In the instructions, it says we're completing exercise set A from the textbook. You really don't even need that information because I give you a link to a template that you're going to use, okay? What you want to do, don't click on the link here because that's going to open it up in the screen, and that's not what you want. What you want to do is download the template. You're going to click on this download arrow, all right? So when you do that, it downloads a Microsoft Word document. That's the document you're going to use to record the answers for the exercise set, which we're actually going to go through in class together. But you're not going to submit that template to me. It's only for your use. The way you're going to get credit is after you have a completed template for you to reference, you're going to come into the exercise set, click on Take the Quiz. Once you start the quiz, you have only 20 minutes, okay? It is timed. So what you're going to have to do is go to each question. I think there are 10 questions. There are 10 questions. So for example, this first one says EA1, that means exercise number 1, row 2 revenues. So you're going to have to go to the template, which looks like this. We see exercise number 1. We see multiple rows here, right? So the second row is this one. And right now there's just a question mark because we haven't figured out the answer yet. But if you already have your template filled in, you'll know what the answer is for revenues on row 2, and then you'll just type that number into Canvas. Okay, so that's how it works. Question number 2 says exercise 3, row 5 liabilities. So you go to exercise number 3, look at row 5, and whatever that number is for liabilities, you're going to put that into Canvas. Okay, so you have to have a completed template before you do this, because since you only have 20 minutes to get the numbers in, which gives you 2 minutes per question. It's plenty of time if you already have the answers in the exercise set template, okay? Another thing I should point out to you, because a lot of students don't realize this, if you don't have Microsoft Word, it's not a problem. You don't have to go buy it. You can use Google Docs or any program that lets you open up and edit Microsoft Word documents. But I'm going to show you with Docs. If you just go to docs.google.com, you can click on blank document, then go File, Open, Upload, browse to that template that you downloaded, and it'll open it up in Google Docs. So again, you don't need to have Microsoft Word. You can edit it here in Google Docs. It saves automatically, and that way you can work on it in class. You can work on it outside of class. All right. So that way you can have a completed exercise set before you make sure you put your name on the list there. Before you submit your answers, when are exercise sets due? Saturday, and problem sets are due on Sunday. Okay. Again, not this weekend, but starting next weekend. And the difference is I go through the entire exercise set with you in class, and I go through some of the problems. So that means you're going to have to solve some of the problems on your own before you try to enter them into Canvas. So that is how it works. What questions do you have about the exercise sets and problem sets? Okay. This is an exercise set. They're really not that different. They have a lot of the same types of problems and exercises. But yeah, this is an exercise set. In fact, we will work on this one next week. All right, other questions? Yes, sir.
I had missed how you put the Microsoft Word into the doc.
Okay, yeah, I can show you again. So, you have to start with a blank document, and there might be another way, but that's the only way I figured out how to do it. So then you go to File, Open, Upload, and then just browse to wherever you saved the file and open it, and it just opens it up. Other questions? You could do that with Microsoft Sheets for Excel files, slides for PowerPoint files. I just assumed that everybody was more technologically knowledgeable than I was, and I realized that some students didn't know about that. So, handy little tip. Okay. So I covered that. Okay. Yeah, I think we're ready to get into our chapter 1 material then, which will help you with the chapter 1 quiz, right? Because we also have a weekly quiz based on the textbook readings. And when is that due?
Sunday.
Sunday, exactly. Exercise sets are Saturdays, problem sets and quizzes are Sunday. All right, so I'm gonna navigate over to our PowerPoints. It is, I think I mentioned on Monday, a light chapter, which is nice. Please put your name on the list there. And I am recording, right? I think I started recording. Yeah, I did. Okay. So please stop me at any time if I'm going too fast, if I'm not making sense. If you have any questions at all, just let me know. So welcome to actually learning about financial accounting. The name of our chapter, The Role of Accounting in Society. So just like I mentioned the other day, all of the disciplines somehow interact: business, accounting, society, social science, everything interacts in some way. One thing we'll talk about today is what financial accounting is and how it's different from managerial accounting. Both of those are required courses for business majors. So if you're a business major, after you complete Business 1A with at least a C, hopefully an A, you can then go on to Business 1B, which is managerial accounting. I teach that one as well. I teach the on-campus version, and there's another instructor who teaches the online version. It's pretty similar in a lot of ways, but of course the content is different. We'll look at some of the differences between financial and managerial accounting a little bit later. It's a tough class. I will tell you, this is a tough class, and that one I think is even tougher. So just so you know. So if you feel like you're struggling at some point, good, that's normal. It's a challenge for everybody, but we'll get you through. Just hang in there and we'll make it. We'll talk about who uses accounting information, because really this whole class is about preparing financial statements. So who are we preparing them for, and what are they going to do with this information? We will talk about the process of identifying financial activities, recording them, and then reporting them in financial statements. Okay, that's the whole class is about that, the whole course. We will talk about some career paths in accounting as well. In April, I don't remember the date offhand, but there is a date in April that we will be visited by one or more professors from CSUMB to talk about their accounting program. And sometimes they bring some students or some former students along with them. So, that'll be a great opportunity for you to hear more about the accounting profession. Maybe you're not interested, but the more you learn about it, maybe you will become interested, because it is an area where there's a lot of demand. The positions pay very well. And you have different things you can do in accounting. Not all accountants do the same thing. They can be very, very different career paths. So that's what we'll talk about. So hard for me to see this. Accounting is the process of organizing, analyzing, and communicating financial information that is used for decision making. That's what accounting is. Obviously, it involves the word counting, right? Accounting involves counting. One thing I find is kind of interesting is that accounting has been around for thousands of years. Do you remember in school learning about the Sumerians and how they made some of the first writings in that part of the world? And they would make these little marks on clay, cuneiform, I think it's called. I might not be pronouncing it right. Do you remember learning about that? So some of the oldest writing that we know about. Well, I've read that the oldest cuneiform writing was actually accounting records. They were keeping track of how many sheep Bob sold to Mary on these little clay tablets with little marks. So accounting has been around for thousands of years. It made a big leap forward in Italy, maybe 400 years ago or so. There was a monk, Luca Pacioli, I think was his name, who came up with what's called the double entry bookkeeping system that we still use today. He came up with a system that takes a while to get used to, but it works and it makes sense. A lot of the struggle that students have in this class is that the math that we do here, even though it's very simple math, the way we format it is different from what we're used to. We use columns, and there'll be information in one column on the left and another column on the right, and then you need to subtract from the other column. It's different from any other math, but it is just basically subtraction or addition. Okay. So that takes a little getting used to. It's called debits and credits. We'll be talking about that a lot in the next couple of weeks, but you will get used to it. And so that system that he came up with is the basis of modern accounting. And I will be honest with you that what we learn in this class is really the concepts and principles and the formulas behind accounting, terminology. If you work as an accountant at some point, your job is going to be very different from what we do in this class because accountants today use software. And in fact, they don't even have to input the data. A lot of times the data is automatically collected from cash registers and invoices, and it's just all automated today. So what accountants do, a lot of it is hire. Remember Bloom's taxonomy I talked to you about? Or remembering and understanding is the basis. For a lot of accounting, it's analyzing and applying concepts. You don't have to do the remembering and understanding as much, but that's mostly what we're going to learn so that we know how accounting works. Okay? Because I'm definitely no expert on accounting software. I can't teach you the. There is a class here if you're interested. Instructor Calvert teaches a class on QuickBooks and other accounting software programs, but primarily QuickBooks. So if you're interested in that, you can take that, but we're not going to do that here. As it says, accounting is the language of business. It's very true. If you want to understand what's going on with the company, you need to look at the financial statements. If you don't know how to read them, it's like a foreign language. But if you know how to read a financial statement, you can look at it and say, ooh, I see a problem here. Or, oh, wow, this company is doing really well. You need to know what the numbers mean. Okay? So that's what we learn, how to prepare those financial statements and how to analyze them. Again, even if you're not going to be an accountant or even not a business major, just being able to understand how accounting works helps you understand why companies and organizations make the decisions that they make. Why does Hartnell College charge whatever it charges for tuition? Why, if you go over to Starbucks there in the student center, why do they charge $5 or whatever it is for a cup of coffee? You understand the accounting principles, you can understand why they do that. Okay. And of course, it ties into economics and marketing as well, but accounting is where the numbers come from. Okay, so hopefully that gives you an overview of what this class is all about. Any questions or comments? So I did mention QuickBooks. That's a common software program that is used for small businesses to keep track of their accounting information. SAP is a program used by large companies, and it's not only for accounting, but basically for the entire company's operations. So these are examples of some of the different programs that you might learn out there if you do work in accounting. In fact, my son, even though his degree has nothing to do with accounting, he's had to learn SAP because his company is implementing it for the entire company, for every department, using one huge software program. Which makes sense, because if your company has lots of different software programs being used in different departments, guess what? Those programs often won't share data with each other. So if this person needs information from this department, they don't have a way to share it. But if you're all in one big software program, one big database, it's much easier to record and share information. This slide shows us the difference between financial and managerial accounting. I'll try to make it a little bigger here for you. That'll work. Okay. So the users of reports. In this class, we're learning how to make financial statements that people outside of the organization can receive. Who do you think outside of an organization, so not the employees, who else would be interested in reading information about a company's financial performance? Those investors. And who else? The government. Who said that? Yeah, you're right. Yeah, like the IRS, for example, they need to know how much money the company earns, so they know how much tax the company has to pay. Okay, so and who said investors? Oh, we did, okay. Investors, government agencies or regulators, who else? Okay. Lenders, that's true. The company wants to borrow money, the bank is going to say, show us your financial statements. There are analysts out there. Their job is to analyze the financial performance of different companies so they can make recommendations to investors and others. Suppliers might even want to see the financial statements. So, so in this course, we're learning how to create these financial statements for people outside the organization. Now, those statements might be useful to people inside the organization as well. But since they're being made available to people outside, we have to make sure that they are accurate and thorough and not fraudulent. Okay, so if we're a company and we're saying, here's how much money we made last year, any investor looking at that information wants to believe that that's true, right? They don't want us to be tricking them. So there's a whole process that we have to go through to make sure these financial statements are accurate, thorough, and not fraudulent. And that involves not only the accountants following a certain process, but auditors coming in to verify from the outside, verifying that the financial statements are correct. Okay? So that is very important in financial accounting and managerial accounting. You're making, and that's the next class that you would take in accounting. In managerial accounting, you're making reports for managers. So those reports don't need to be audited. They don't need to follow any particular procedures. It's whatever the managers need because it's staying within the company. Okay, so that's a key difference. What questions do you have so far? Okay, the types of reports. There are 5 financial statements that we're going to learn to make in this class. In fact, we'll have made them within the next week or two. Making the financial statements is really not that hard if you already have the data. Finding the data is another story. But there are 5 basic statements. We see some of them here, the balance sheet, the income statement, the cash flow statement. We can add to that list the statement of stockholders' equity and the retained earnings statement. Those are the only 5 statements we're going to need to learn to make in this class. Okay? In managerial accounting, it's whatever the managers need, that's what you prepare for them. So there are many more different types of reports you might make in that class. Corporations typically have to produce an annual statement as well as quarterly financial statements. And sometimes they even produce monthly statements. So that is the standard, at least quarterly statements. In managerial accounting, it's again, whenever the managers need them. The purpose of the reports, as I mentioned, in financial accounting, they're designed for people outside the organization. In managerial accounting, they're designed for managers inside the company to help them make their decisions about how are we doing as far as our costs, as far as our sales, what do we need to do differently? That's the purpose in managerial accounting. I mentioned that we have to follow certain procedures to make sure that our accounting records are thorough, accurate, and not fraudulent, right? Those procedures are called GAAP, G-A-A-P. Does anybody know what GAAP stands for? Generally accepted accounting principles, okay? In managerial accounting, we don't have to worry about GAAP because, again, the reports are only going to be used internally. In financial accounting, the reports are monetary in nature. Everything is measured in dollars and cents. In managerial accounting, not always. Some managerial accounting deals with things like social responsibility, sustainability, environmental impact, employee satisfaction, things that you can't really measure in dollars and cents. And then financial accounting statements do have to be audited by an outside certified public accountant. It comes in, looks at the books and says either yes, these are accurate, or no, there are some problems here. Okay? In managerial accounting, there is no outside audit. All right, what questions do you have? Oh, forgot to mention, I think I showed you there were some accounting stuff videos that have videos related to each chapter. Did I show you that on Monday? That's what that link is there to remind me. The videos tend to be like 9 or 10 minutes long, so I don't usually show them in class. There might be one that we might watch today that just gives a good overview of accounting. But they are there. In fact, if I go back, if you look under chapter 1, you see a link to accounting stuff videos. Every chapter that has some accounting stuff videos, I put a link in there. And the page has them in order by chapter. So you see chapter 1 has quite a few, chapter 2 has a couple, Some chapters, like 5, 6, and 7, there aren't any. Okay, so just kind of depends on the chapter. So if you want to hear more about the difference between financial and managerial accounting, you could check out accounting stuff. All right, let's see. Types of organizations. All organizations use accounting. There are differences in government accounting. In fact, that's even an area of specialization. You can get certified as a government accountant if you're interested in that. So for-profit businesses, nonprofit businesses, and governments all use accounting. We can break these businesses down into different categories, like manufacturing businesses. What does a manufacturing business do? Manufacture, right? What does it mean to manufacture? Create. To create. They produce something, right? Then we've got retail businesses. In this class, those are sometimes called they're called merchandising businesses. Okay, so retail or merchandising is the same thing. What is retail?
Like resell?
Okay, they resell. They sell something that somebody else produced. Sometimes they sell their own product in a retail store, but most of the time they sell somebody else's product. And the service company provides some sort of service, right? Okay. All of them use accounting. And the principles we're going to learn in this class are pretty much the same for all different types of businesses. We're going to focus on businesses that are corporations for the most part, since most large companies are corporations. But we will learn a little bit about partnership accounting and sole proprietorships as well. If we think about the automobile industry, are there automobile manufacturers?
Yeah.
What are a couple examples?
That's Ford.
Tesla, Ford, okay, right? They produce automobiles. Are there automobile retailers?
Yes.
What are some examples?
CarMax.
Okay, CarMax, what else?
Honda.
Honda, yeah, there are Honda dealerships, right? Honda of America produces the automobiles, but then there are Honda dealerships, which are usually locally owned, that sell the Hondas, right? And what about service? Are there automobile service companies?
Yes.
Taxi, Uber.
Okay, so you have services where they use the vehicle, or what was that? Rent. Where you can rent a car like Hertz and Budget and so forth. But then there are also the dealerships that service the vehicles or mechanics that actually fix the vehicles, right? So what's that?
Those are more like high-end companies.
The ones that fix the cars?
Yeah.
You know, especially the dealerships, yeah, expensive. Whenever I can, I don't go to a dealership, I tell you. Although, side note, we have a Kia Soul that it's a 2017. Last year, it had almost 98,000 miles on it. My daughter was driving it and the engine died for good. And so we had it towed into a mechanic. They couldn't fix it. Well, guess what? Kia has a 100,000-mile warranty. I didn't even realize that. But in calling around, I talked to one mechanic shop and he said, oh, why don't you check with the dealer because you might be under warranty. And he was right. I was so happy because that was going to be like an $8,000 repair to put a new engine in there. So we lucked out because if it only had a couple thousand miles more on it, we would have been out of warranty, right? So it broke down like just in time. That was lucky. I could tell you some other unlucky stories I've had with getting cars fixed as well. But yeah, dealers are expensive. Yeah. All right, so you get the idea. And how you do the accounting is going to differ somewhat. when you get into managerial accounting, if you do end up taking that class, you will find manufacturing companies are really hard to track the costs for. Because manufacturers have to get the materials, they have to put in the labor and track something called overhead for their products. That's a lot of cost to keep track of. There could be thousands of parts in one vehicle. Just imagine keeping track of all those costs. So retail is typically easier to keep track of. We do have a chapter in this course on merchandising, and we have one on inventory as well. So that's going to relate a lot to retail. Service companies, because they don't have physical products, kind of easier to track their costs. But you'll see that in this course, it's not going to make a huge difference what type of company we're talking about. There are some differences in terminology with nonprofits and government accounting, but we're not going to get into that very much. Okay, we've talked about manufacturing, retail, and service companies, right? So think about a restaurant. How would you classify a restaurant? Manufacturer, retailer, or service? Depends on the restaurant. I heard all three. Okay, it could be all three, right? Because they manufacture the food, right? Even if they didn't manufacture the raw ingredients, they took those ingredients and turned them into the product that you're buying, the meal. They might just sell like loaves of bread or jars of jam, right? So they might act as a retailer. Do they provide a service?
Yeah.
Yeah, taking your order, fulfilling your order, right? I went to a restaurant a couple times. My son told us about it. It's in San Jose called Kura Rotating Sushi, I think is the name. Revolving Sushi. Has anybody been there? Yeah. So it's pretty cool because they have, for one thing, a robot that brings you your drinks. Kind of fun, right? But I know there are even restaurants around here that have that. But they also have, next to your table, there's this conveyor belt and sushi just keeps rolling by. Whenever you see something you like, you just take it off and it automatically knows what you took and keeps track. And then if you want a special order, there's a screen, you can special order. I think I might, no, I have a video somewhere, but it would take me too long to find it. There's a screen where you can special order things, and then there's a separate conveyor belt where that comes really fast, comes to your table. It's pretty fun. And then you can pay there on the screen as well. And then after you paid, if you deposit the plates, the empty plates into this little slot, and it counts how many plates you used. And if you used, I think, 15 plates, there's this thing above the table with all these round spheres in them, and one of them will come down. It's like a prize. You get to open it up, and there's something inside. So it's like it's a game. And the whole thing, you could have the whole experience without talking to a human being. It's pretty crazy. And the food was really good.
How much was it?
It wasn't that cheap. It was like maybe a little more expensive than normal sushi.
What's it called?
Kura, Kura. I think it's rotating sushi, something like that. They've got a couple locations, I think. So anyways, that was a tangent. Let me see how we're doing on time. Oh, okay. So, okay, how many people are familiar with this term stakeholder? Stakeholder. Okay, I know some of you took my intro to business class and we used this term and you didn't raise your hand. What is a stakeholder? Somebody tell me.
Someone that holds stake in a company that has a certain portion of equity into the
So that is true, but that is not the whole picture. Jacob, right?
Yeah.
So a stakeholder has a stake in the company, but it's different from a stockholder that owns stock in the company. Okay, sounds similar, but it's not quite the same thing. As you see here, a stockholder can also be called a shareholder because they own shares of stock. So you could say either stockholder or shareholder means the same thing. And because they have an interest, a stake in the company, they can also be called a stakeholder. But a creditor that lends money to the company is also a stakeholder. They have a stake in the company's success because they want to get their money back. The government and regulatory agencies, they have a stake in the company because they want to collect taxes and fees and fines and whatever else the company has to pay, right? And they want to make sure that the company's not treating employees badly or treating customers badly. Customers have a stake in the company because what if they have a problem with the product, they need help getting that fixed, right? Like, can you imagine if when our Kia Soul broke down, I called up the Kia dealership to say, hey, I want it fixed under warranty, and they said, sorry, we're out of business. I would be out of luck, right? So customers have a stake in the company. Managers and all other employees also have a stake in the company, right? So all of these different groups can be called stakeholders. Very important term. In fact, I'm sure you remember on Monday, I told you about stakeholder theory, right? Which means you should pay attention to the needs of all these different groups, not only the investors. Okay? And really, all these different groups might be interested in reading the financial statements. There was a time after I'd earned my MBA, so I thought I knew more than I really knew about business. I was working as the director of technical support for this software company. This is back, this was from 1999 to 2002. So this is during the time of the dot-com bubble bursting. Wasn't a great time to be working in tech, okay? But it was my period in the tech industry. So the reason I'm telling you this story, while I was working there, as it was a small company, we had maybe 40 employees. Half of them were in my department because I was in charge of technical support. So I had a group of up to 20 people. So I was focused on my team and making sure they were doing their job. I reported to the CEO, as did several other executives. And I just trusted the CEO and the chief financial officer, the CFO. I just trusted that they were handling all the money stuff. And even though I had an MBA, I did not look at our financial statements. I didn't ask for them. And in fact, I even bought stock in my company that I was working for because I believed so much in the company. As an investor, I should have done my research. And maybe I would have realized that even though the company was growing, we weren't making a profit. And really, that was true for most of the internet companies at that time. Most of them were not making profits. They were getting lots of investment capital from investors because everybody back in 1999 and 2000, everybody was investing in tech companies. So it was really easy to get money. But that didn't mean that your company was profitable. And I ended up buying too much stock in that company. And when, after a couple years, we ran out of money because we weren't profitable, and we couldn't get any more investment capital because investors got scared away when the dot-com bubble burst. In other words, when they realized that these tech companies weren't as profitable as they thought, they started to sell their shares of stock, and that brings down the price. And that causes more investors to sell their shares, which further brings down the price. So it went like this, and then it went like that. So that's what often happens. It's called a bubble. Well, when that happened, we couldn't raise any more money from investors. Nobody wanted to invest in tech at that point, and we were broke. And the company ended up getting taken over by this guy who, there are terms like corporate raider, corporate vulture. He was one of those types of folks. Comes in, steals the assets, well, acquires the assets of a company, and then leaves, leaves the rest of the company, the employees and the creditors, to suffer because he took everything. That's what happened to us. If I'd been smarter, I would have asked to see the financial statements. I would have studied them closely. And I would have said to the CEO, hey, we're not making a profit here. Don't you think we need to cut back some costs somewhere? And he probably would have said no. He thought everything was fine. But at least I could have then said, well, maybe I shouldn't buy stock in this company because what happens if you go out of business? So even employees might want to study the financial statements of their employers and understand what's going on. Whether they need to be looking for a new job or investing in the company, right? You can get a better idea of that if you know how to read the financial statements. All right, what questions do you have?
When you ask for that information, that for private?
Good question. Okay, good question. So for corporations, some are publicly traded, meaning you can buy their stock on a stock exchange. That was the case with this particular company. Even though we were small, we were publicly traded. And so that information was public. It was probably posted on the website. I could have just gone and looked at it. If a corporation is privately held, that means you cannot buy their stock on a stock exchange. Only a handful of investors or a small amount of investors can invest in the company. And in that case, they do have to provide their financial statements to the IRS and the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, but they do not need to make their financial statements public if they're a private. So, great question. Other questions?
You still have like shares?
Well, for years, okay. For years, I held on to the shares I had. I bought shares between $6 and $9 a share, which is kind of low for shares. But between $6 and $9 a share, 9 was the peak. They went down to 6, down to 2, down to like less than a penny at one point. And I kept them as long as I could, hoping that someday the person that took over the company would bring the stock price up. But he just let it go. He didn't care. He'd gotten what he wanted out of the company. So it became worthless, and I don't have shares anymore. Yeah. Yep. Big lesson. All right. Good questions. What was that? Okay. All right. So let's see. How can companies raise funding? If you took my intro to business class or any intro to business class, you probably learned a little bit about this. Let's say you're a corporation, like the one I was telling you about that I used to work for, and you're out of money. Where can you get more money? There are basically 3 ways. What's that? Loans? Loans. Yes, you can borrow money. That's probably here. Borrowing, right? Also known as debt funding or debt financing. That means somebody makes a loan to you and you have to pay it back, right? It could be from selling stock. That's what the .com companies were trying to do. Raise money by selling stock until nobody wanted to buy their stock anymore, right? Or from your own operations. If you are selling your product or service and your revenue is higher than your expenses, what do we call that in the middle? That's your profit, right? That is a fundamental formula in business. Your revenue minus your expenses is your profit. What happens if your expenses are higher than your revenue? You're losing money, exactly. You're operating at a loss. Okay, so that's, if a business fails, a lot of times it's because we're losing money, right? And that's where accounting can help companies make sure their revenues are going up and their expenses are either going down or going up slower than the revenues so that they maintain their profit margin. Oh yeah, this mentions that the individuals make hundreds of food decisions every day. This is from a study. Now, I'm not sure exactly how they decide what is a food decision. I guess it could be things like, do I want more salt on this? What should I order, or what should I make? It's kind of hard for me to imagine it's 200 decisions, but let's just say that they're right. We make 200 food decisions every day. Imagine if you're a business, how many decisions you're making about how much to produce, what materials you need, who to hire, what to schedule. There's so many decisions to make, right? And if you're a manager, if you're an investor, if you're a lender, financial statements help you make those decisions. Right? They give you the information you need to make those decisions. Okay. Characteristics of accounting professionals. So if you, at some point, think maybe accounting might be a field you want to go into, ask yourself, are you a goal-oriented person? Are you a problem solver? Are you organized and analytical? I think these are all things you might expect for accountants. Do you have good interpersonal skills? That might be a surprise because the stereotype is that accountants are kind of nerdy, kind of like statisticians and math people might be kind of introverted. They might be, but actually these days, a big part of accounting is communication, giving presentations, talking to people in different departments. So interpersonal skills actually today is very important for accountants. Attention to detail, okay, that's critical. If you do not have good attention to detail, maybe accounting is not the best field for you. I'm going to be honest with you, except for a 3-month period where I was in charge of accounts payable for a group of companies, accounting has never been my job title. I've had some of my own businesses and had to do accounting, but it's never been my career path. I did have financial advisory practice, which is similar, related, but I'm not an accountant. And I don't think I have the attention to detail that is needed. I like to do things quickly. I like to get it mostly right. And I don't like to go back and double check and triple check in most cases. So I probably wouldn't make a good accountant because that's critical. If you print out a financial statement and it says that the company earned $100,000 when it really only earned $10,000, so you basically put in one extra zero by mistake, that's a big mistake, right? One little thing can have major implications. So attention to detail is really important in accounting, time management, and believe it or not, being outgoing relates to having those interpersonal skills. So if that does sort of describe you, maybe accounting would be a good match for you. And again, there are different parts, different fields within accounting. Some of them use some of these traits more than others. So here, as far as the education you need for accounting, entry-level positions usually require a bachelor's degree. But again, they pay usually pretty well. Even in this area, you can make really good money off the bat once you have an accounting degree, especially if you go on and you get your certified public accountant license. Advanced positions might require not only experience and professional development, but also certifications, like I just mentioned, a CPA license or others, and sometimes even advanced degrees. Okay, so you can go, in fact, when I was working on my doctorate, one of my fellow students was an accountant. He was getting his PhD in accounting. Why not? Doctorate of philosophy in accounting. Now, he mainly works in education, and I think he does some consulting, but why not? Okay, but even with just a bachelor's degree, you can get really good jobs in accounting. I did provide a link here to this 2022 accounting degree guide. I don't know. Let me see. Make sure that link is still valid here. See. I don't know if it's been updated or not. Okay, it looks like it was updated to 2023. So I should fix that. I just came across this page one time, and there was a lot of really good information here about accounting degrees. Apparently, it's the number 8 most popular major, but there's a shortage. There aren't enough people going into accounting. So there's a lot of good statistics and detail here about accounting as a major and accounting as a degree. So if you're interested, I do recommend you check it out. Let me just change this to 2023. And again, if you want to look at this PowerPoint in Canvas, just go to Files, and then you go down to the PowerPoint folder, and then just open up Chapter 1. Okay, so you can click on that link and you can check that out in more detail. Related careers, financial analysts. If you get an accounting undergraduate degree, one option is to go into being a financial analyst, a personal financial planner. That's kind of like what I used to do. Actually, I did used to be a financial planner. Is that right? I used to be, I don't know. Business executives, there are many ways you can go with an accounting degree that are not even in accounting. Okay, what questions do you have? Yes, sir.
Is a data analyst part of accounting?
Yes, a data analyst can be in a lot of different fields, but it is a good combination. In fact, there is a video under one of our chapters that talks about combining accounting with data analysis and why a lot of people are doing that. Yeah, really good choice. Having the skill set of being able to take large amounts of information and analyze it with the accounting skill set is a very powerful combination. Okay. Other questions? I just looked at my clock, but let me double check. Okay, yeah, we're doing fine here on time. Again, feel free if you need to step out at any time, you are welcome to do that. So here's some possible career paths. If you study accounting, you could become an auditor. So in that case, there are basically 2 types of auditors. An auditor looks at the books, the financial records, and verifies if they're correct or not. You could do that for your own company, which would make you an internal auditor, or you could look at the books of somebody else's company for them, and that would make you an external auditor. Okay, so that's one option. I've heard something from somebody who was an accounting major who said that she thought about going into auditing, but then she realized that when the auditor arrives, everybody's kind of freaked out, like, oh no, the auditor's here. What are they going to find? She went into tax accounting right here and helps her company save money through tax strategies. And she said when she arrives, they're all happy to see her. So something to think about. If you like if you like intimidating people, maybe being an auditor is a good way to go. If you like having everybody be your best friend, maybe tax accounting is a good way to go. Again, financial accounting is what we're learning about here. There are people that specialize in preparing financial statements. Consulting, helping companies with their accounting strategies and operations. Information systems, you can combine accounting and information systems, helping companies develop software or implement software to automate their accounting processes. You can go into financial planning. That could be for companies to help them make financial plans, like where to invest their extra money. But it could also be with individuals and families, helping them figure out how to invest their money, how to protect their assets and things like that. Managerial accounting, as I told you, preparing reports for managers, and even starting your own business, going into entrepreneurship. Or a lot of people with a CPA license open up their own CPA practice and they do accounting for their clients. Okay. So lots of different options if you study accounting. Questions? Pays the most? You know, I think I've got a graph somewhere. No, I guess I don't. Since you asked, I think it was yesterday in my managerial accounting class, we were looking at something along those lines. Let me just get to it.
It's a guess.
Okay.
Information systems.
It does, but this doesn't show everything. Let's see. I don't know if that's even, accounting software developer shows up here. That's kind of on those lines. That's in the middle. But again, it kind of depends on the size of the company and exactly what your role is. Okay. So take this with a grain of salt. But according to this particular graphic, VP of Finance and Chief Financial Officer would be the top paying positions that you might go into with an accounting background. And you might be wondering, wait a minute, isn't the CFO above the VP of Finance? Shouldn't it be the other way? Shouldn't CFO make the most? I think the reason CFO comes in number 2 is because you can have CFOs in large companies and in small companies. Whereas typically you only have a VP of Finance in a larger company. In a small company, you have the CFO. You don't need the VP. International tax manager pays pretty well, because as you can imagine, that's kind of complicated. Taxes are hard enough, but knowing taxes in multiple countries would be challenging. Finance director, corporate controller. The controller is sometimes in charge of the whole accounting department. Cost accountant manager, senior financial analyst, accounting software, forensic accounting. Who knows what forensic accounting is? That's where you get to look at the accounting records to figure out who committed the crime and how they did it, like who stole the money or who was money laundering. So to me, that seems like it would be fun. FBI accountant, same kind of thing. Tax accountant, auditor, cost accountant, bookkeeper. Bookkeepers don't even necessarily even need a degree. You can get a bookkeeping certificate, I believe, here at Hartnell. And that could get you a good start as a bookkeeper. So that gives you an idea. And let's see. Now this is also not the most recent. I don't see a date on here, but this is at least 5 years old. So you can expect all of these rates of pay have probably gone up. Plus in this area, it's probably even higher. So I would imagine if you're a CFO in a company around here, you're probably looking at $200,000 a year, maybe more. All right, any other questions? Okay, this shows who your employers might be. Trying to move this. You could go to work for one of the big four. Has anybody heard of the big four? Those are the four largest accounting firms in the United States. Public accounting firms. There are smaller ones too. But does anybody know who are any of the big four accounting companies? So it would be Ernst and Young, Price Waterhouse Coopers, KPMG, and what's the other one? Oh, Deloitte. Those are the big four. It used to be the big five until I think it was 2002 when Arthur Andersen, that was the other one, they got in some ethical trouble and quickly lost all of their customers and went basically out of business. So now it's the big four. If you get a degree in accounting, you'll have opportunities. You could go work for one of the big four accounting firms, make a lot of money. They'll probably send you to different states, different countries to work with different clients. It's hard work, but the benefits and the pay are really good, and there's a lot of opportunity to move up the ladder. So if that sort of thing interests you, there's that opportunity. There are smaller public accounting firms like, it used to be Hayashi Wayland was the big local accounting firm in this area. They got acquired by CLA. Anybody know what that stands for? Forgot exactly what CLA stands for, but they are, I believe, a nationwide accounting firm. They're not one of the big four, but they're in the mid-level. So you can get jobs. They have an office in Carmel. They've got one here in Salinas. They've got one or two others in the county. Working for them. In fact, some of our Hartnell alumni have gone to work for CLA and have really good jobs. So if you're working for a public accounting firm, you're probably doing accounting for their clients. So they send you and say, hey, today go to Taylor Farms and help them with this, or go to Driscoll's and help them with whatever. Okay. You could go work for any corporation because all corporations do accounting, you know, for themselves. They almost all have an accounting department. You could work in government. We have an accounting department right here in Hartnell. And some of those jobs pay pretty well. Plus you get a pension, which is nice, and good benefits. And you get to stay around Hartnell. So you could work for us or for any other government entity because they all have to keep track of accounting. You could go work for a nonprofit. Large nonprofits are pretty well funded. Smaller nonprofits sometimes don't have a lot of money, so they don't pay that well. Just depends. But they need to do accounting too. Even if they are a nonprofit, that doesn't mean that they don't make a profit. Okay? I know that seems weird. The nonprofits can earn a profit. They just have to put that money back into the organization. They can't give it to investors because they don't have investors. And so they do need to track accounting just like any other company. And of course, you could just work for yourself and start your own accounting company. Okay, I broke it again. Any questions? All right, there is an accounting stuff video on this topic as well. This is different certifications you can get in the accounting field. The most prestigious one is the Certified Public Accountant or CPA certification. If you end up going to CSUMB as an accounting major, they've got 3 different tracks. I'm trying to think, I think they call it like general accounting is one option. I forgot, professional accounting or something is another option, and then they've got financial planning. So depending on exactly which area you want to specialize in. But once you finish your bachelor's degree in accounting, then you can prepare to take the CPA exam. There are probably some extra courses you would want to take to get ready to take the exam. If you pass the exam, you're then licensed as a certified public accountant. And that pushes your ability to make money up a notch or two, okay, because you have that license. But you could also get certified in management accounting. So when you take managerial accounting, if you find that you really like it, and you want to specialize in that area, you can get certified specifically in management accounting. If you want to be an auditor, you can get certified as an internal auditor. If you want to do external auditing, that would be the CPA license. If you want to be a fraud examiner, catch the bad guys, then the certified fraud examiner choice. If you want to be able to analyze companies and see how they're doing financially and then be able to make recommendations, tell investors, well, this company seems to be spending a lot of money, but you know, this company's revenues are growing, that sort of thing. Like the people that you see on CNBC or Bloomberg or any of those investment TV programs are financial analysts. They might not be certified, but that's what they are. And if you want to help wealthy people figure out how to invest their money, then you might want to be a certified financial planner. A friend of mine just became a certified financial planner within the last year. He had to study a long time, several months before he took the exam, he passed it. And so now he's starting a certified financial planning practice. And he's already got about 10 clients. His goal, if he gets up to 100 clients, he charges them 1% per year to manage their assets. So let's say he's got 100 clients and he's managing $100,000 of assets or investments for each one. So 100 times 100,000 would be $10 million that he's managing. He gets 1% of that, $100,000 a year, right? Just from those 100 clients. So that's a route to go, but it is very sales related. You have to go find the clients. You have to convince people to let you invest their money, which is, if you're a good salesperson, great. I was never good at that. Not my thing. Okay, questions? All right. Oh, is this the last page already? My goodness. Okay, we are doing well on time. All right, so this is what we've learned. I told you it's a light chapter. Unlike some of them are not so light. Okay, so what did we learn? We learned the difference between financial and managerial accounting, right? Which one makes financial statements for people primarily outside the organization? Financial, right? And managerial is for managers. Who uses accounting information? Stakeholders, okay, which includes all kinds of different people, employees, customers, investors, and so on. Accounting involves identifying financial transactions. Okay? Every sale that's made, every purchase that's made, every dollar owed to an employee, all of that has to be identified. Usually it's a pretty automated process, but we need to take that data, make sure it's recorded properly, has to be very organized in certain accounts, and then from that you can make your financial statements. Okay, so that's what we'll be learning about. We know what stakeholders are, we just discussed that, and we looked at different career paths. All right. Now, this is the sort of information that's going to be covered in the Chapter 1 quiz. So you definitely want to make sure, if you haven't already, read through Chapter 1. We're not done. I don't want you to think we're done for today. We've got plenty of time, and we are going to use it wisely here. But I'm going to stop recording.